There are a lot of reports coming out of Mets spring training camp that's I feel as though it's getting a little bit blown out of proportion. Soto moving to left field, and then the Lindor hamate bone injury. That's just the name too. So my guy Tyler Ward, your favorite Mets content creator, is going to hop in to talk all things Amazins, and hopefully he can talk some of the fans off the ledge right now because the season hasn't even started yet, folks. Wardy, appreciate you hopping on with me, man. I know you're heading down to Port St. Lucie in a little bit, so it was good to get you while you're not so busy down there in the Florida sun. Let's start with the news that just broke that Lindor has opted for surgery and he'll potentially be out for 6 weeks because of the stress reaction in his hamate bone. Do you feel like the panic that was created when David Stearns kind of announced this is being blown out of proportion?
Yeah, I think like any other injury, it depends on what part of the fan base you talk to, right? Because this has a lot more to do on prior issues as a Mets fan than anything else. Because when you look at this injury for Lindor in the forefront, you're not overly concerned. You see someone that obviously needs to get that broken hamate bone fixed in the middle of their hand, and then he'll have that 6 week to at worst 8 week recovery window. So should bring him right to around opening day, if not at worst. Maybe you won't have him for the first couple weeks. I mean, the Mets didn't have Francisco Alvarez until right around April 24th or so of last year when he went down with his hamate bone injury right around mid-March, if not this just entering the second week of March. So naturally, what Mets fans think about is not just that injury for Alvarez, which really derailed the start of his 2025 season, because the one problem that you have with this hamate bone injury is that while you're going to get power back in your swing naturally, it's not necessarily that's going to happen overnight. And because of that reason, and knowing that you have so many games that you have to play, naturally you don't love the idea of someone like Lindor having an even slower start to the regular season than maybe what he typically does, because he's been notorious for a guy who normally doesn't step up until we reach mid to late May as is. But knowing that every single year, Brandon, at least since I've been covering the club and really have been a fan over the past, 10, 15 plus years, it feels like every year the Mets have a top player that goes down with injury right in the beginning of spring training. That is where more of the fan outcry comes from. But is it valid? Is it justified in the case of Lindor's injury? Not nearly to the same degree as all these pitchers we're seeing go down with injury left and right across the league. And Lindor's just one of multiple players, top players, are going down with the same injury. Jackson Holliday is going under the knife for the same injury for the Orioles today. And the same was announced with Corbin Carroll, who is supposed to be one of the main faces offensively for Team USA in the World Baseball Classic. So it's quite unfortunate.
All right, so not that big of a deal. It's not like it's Tommy John's surgery where he's going to miss, up to 18 months or anything like that. Just he may start off the season a little slow. But I'm one of those guys, I got to bring this back to football. I'm one of those guys where if one of the stars is going down and is going to miss some time in training camp or spring training, that presents me with an opportunity to showcase what I can do. So what options does Carlos Mendoza have to fill that void while Lindor is out, this 6 to 8 weeks? And who now has been presented with an opportunity to put some good things on tape?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, because if you asked this, say, like 2 months ago, your answer would have been right away. Oh, it's Luis Angel Acuna. Like, he's the Mets' main backup option at shortstop. He's the guy that's going to get more of the continued reps there. Well, he's a Chicago White Sox now. Luis Robert is a New York Met. And now the Mets infield configuration consists of players like veterans Vidal Brujan, Christian Arroyo, two guys who were both picked up this past offseason that have levels of shortstop experience. Then you, of course, have the youngster headlined by Roddy Mauricio, for example. The Mets, according to Carlos Mendoza, are not going to give Bo Bichette any shortstop reps as of now because they really want him to smoothly transition to third base there. So you're going to just see a rotation of youngsters, including some veterans that are fringe MLB players, like I mentioned, in Brujan and Christian Arroyo. You may see a Gray Kessinger and that mix as well among some others. But all in all, the goal here is that Lindor doesn't miss much of any time, because unfortunately, as currently constructed, the Mets don't have a clear backup shortstop option the way that they most certainly did just a couple months ago.
Talk about the second Avenger on this team, Juan Soto. The news broke that he was moving from right to left field this season. Is that being blown out of proportion?
No, I don't think so at all. I think from everything I've seen among the fan base, I think that everyone's kind of satisfied with this, just because Juan Soto, statistically per Baseball Savant, was the worst right fielder in baseball last year. Not an easy thing to do, and I will say he didn't look as bad as what the numbers would tell you. But handling right field is a little bit of a tricky circumstance versus other positions at Citi Field specifically, given their dimensions, given the way that the ball can also ricochet and kind of hit off the wall a bit there at the Cadillac Club. So shifting Soto to left field, a position that he started his career with that we saw in 2019 or so with the Nationals, as well as most recently played a full season in his final year with the Padres in 2023 there, I'm confident that Soto can handle that position. And typically, your worst outfielder for your defensive configuration should be someone who plays in left field, which is why someone like Luis Robert will get mainly playing time in center, may get some reps in right, or maybe they go off with Carson Bench or someone else. They flip-flop the two. But Carson Bench, the Mets' top outfield prospect, they clearly believe may have his best foot in the door development-wise to handle right field instead of, say, center or left. And I'm all for that, given the Mets' outfield configuration and given the fact that as things currently constructed, they don't have an immense amount of depth in the corner. You know, whether it's going to be a Carson Bench or whether it may be someone like a Brett Beatty, among others, you know, they're going to toy with some options there, but they're really making it obvious that Carson Bench, their top outfield prospect, is going to get the keys and see if he can actually take and ride with it into the sunset, which is an everyday role in this Mets corner outfield.
February 16th is the date to keep an eye on. That's when the full squad reports down to Port St. Lucie. They start their first workout. All right, so 5 days from now is what we have. I know you mentioned some already, but are there any other holes that still need to be filled or addressed during spring training?
Oh, absolutely. You know, the fun part about spring training, Brandon, is that you get to see the position player battles in various ways, right? So you look at, for example, beginning with not just position players, but even the relievers. You know, I'm always most excited about the bullpen because right now the Mets have about 2 to 3 bullpen spots that's wide open. In the case of anyone that the Mets have signed throughout the offseason that is getting a spring training invite as a reliever, or youngsters that they currently have on the farm are going to get a true chance to showcase themselves and their abilities and really see who's going to be the best of this group here over the next month or so. So I'm excited to see how the bullpen battle is going to go, including guys, whether that's going to be like a Dylan Ross, a Ryan Lambert, the youngsters that have a lot of upside of flamethrowing ability. Is going to be someone picked up this past offseason like a veteran and a Craig Kimbrell who has so many innings, but how many does he have left? Not entirely sure. Are they going to consider Anderson Severino, who's a flamethrowing southpaw when they don't really have one? Are they going to lean more in with Mr. Hudson, who they traded for yesterday, who had levels of success with the Brewers in 2024? You have options there. And then beyond that, the only other thing you really need to figure out right now, transparently, is just the rotation configuration for the Mets to trade for one more quality starter. It appears that that ship has sailed to happen at least prior to the regular season beginning. So when you look at the depth chart of these starters, now the Mets have a great task to handle, which is, okay, who's going to crack her top 5, top 6, and who's going to be on the outside looking in? The Mets have an abundance of depth, so it's really going to be intriguing to see who bests others and their matchup, and how much does Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns carry that? How much weight does that truly carry in their decision-making heading into their opening day roster and lab configuration?
Lastly, real quick, give us a name that's flying under the radar that no one is talking about right now that we should keep an eye out on.
Honestly, when I look at this entire pitching staff, let's talk a bit about Tobias Myers. I mean, seriously, this is a guy that's being stretched out as a starter by the New York Mets, had a sub-2 ERA this past year as a Milwaukee Brewer, carved up the Mets in the 2024 wildcard round as a starter, going 5 strong innings. And now he is basically the throw-in along with Freddie Peralta in a massive blockbuster trade, has numerous years of club control, and has everything that the Mets could possibly want in a true swingman as someone who can start and relief in any form or fashion whenever called upon. That is the lone pitcher I'm keeping most tabs on this spring training because there's a lot of upside with him, and I think he's getting overshadowed quite a bit because Freddie Peralta was the main piece that came in that deal with the Brewers.
All right, I'm going to set a Google alert for Tobias Myers because Wardy says so. Appreciate you hopping on, my man.
Thanks so much, Brandon. Always a pleasure.